Well, hello there, and thanks for tuning in. It's wonderful to have you joining me today. You know, life after 60, it brings with it a certain kind of wisdom, doesn't it? We've learned so much, experienced so much, and hopefully we've gotten a little smarter about how we take care of ourselves. We've probably cooked countless meals over the years, figured out a thing or two in the kitchen, and maybe gotten into a comfortable routine. And let's be honest, sometimes that routine involves cooking a little extra, so we have lovely leftovers for the next day. Right? It's practical, saves time, saves effort, and can even save a bit of money. Plus, some dishes like a hearty stew or a rich casserole just seem to taste even better the second time around. But you know, as we navigate this beautiful stage of life, our bodies change in subtle ways. Things that didn't used to bother us might start to. Our digestive systems, for example, might become a little more sensitive. Our immune systems, while still doing their best work, might not be quite as quick to bounce back from challenges as they were in our younger days. And that's why paying a little extra attention to something as seemingly simple as reheating food becomes really, truly important. It's not about being overly cautious or fearful. It's about being smart and proactive in protecting our health and well-being. We want to feel good, have energy, and enjoy our days without unnecessary hiccups, don't we? Foodborne illness, often called food poisoning, is something we hear about. But we might think, oh, that happens to other people, or I'm careful it won't happen to me. And most of the time, thankfully, that's true. But the risk is just a little bit higher for us as we get older, and the effects can sometimes be more severe. A nasty bout of food poisoning isn't just unpleasant. It can lead to dehydration, weakness, and really knock the stuffing out of you, sometimes taking a long time to recover from. And nobody wants that. So, understanding a few simple things about which foods are okay to reheat, and perhaps more importantly, which ones really aren't, is just another tool in our toolbox for staying healthy and vibrant. It's about making small, informed choices that support our goal of living our best lives every single day. In our time together today, we're going to dive into this topic of reheating food. It might sound a little basic, but I promise you, there are some surprising things to learn. We're going to talk about 3 specific foods that, for safety reasons, you should really try to avoid reheating once they've been cooked. And on the flip side, we'll also cover 3 foods that actually must be reheated properly to be safe for eating again. It's a mix of things you might have in your kitchen right now, and understanding the why behind these recommendations is key. It helps us make better decisions automatically, without having to constantly worry or guess. Think of it as adding some valuable knowledge to your already impressive lifetime of experience. Let's start with the first category: foods you should never, or at least very, very rarely and with extreme caution, reheat. The very first one on this list might surprise you because it's such a common staple, something many of us cook in batches and store for later meals. I'm talking about cooked rice. Yes, plain old rice. It seems so innocent, doesn't it? You cook up a pot for dinner, there's a good bit left. You pop it in a container and plan to have it with your stir-fry or curry tomorrow. Seems perfectly sensible. However, cooked rice can be a bit of a silent troublemaker if not handled correctly from the moment it's finished cooking. Here's the reason why cooked rice is on never reheat list, or perhaps more accurately, the be extremely cautious about reheating list. And it comes down to a sneaky little bacterium called Bacillus cereus. Now, you don't need to remember the name, just understand what it does. This bacterium is often present in uncooked rice. It doesn't cause problems when the rice is dry or being cooked, but the spores it produces can survive the cooking process. That's right. Those tiny, tough spores are still there even after your rice is perfectly fluffy and cooked. The problem arises when cooked rice is left standing at room temperature for too long. Those surviving spores can start to multiply, and as they grow, they produce toxins. These toxins are the real villains here. And here's the tricky part. Reheating the rice, even heating it up thoroughly in a microwave or on the stovetop, often doesn't destroy these toxins. The heat kills the bacteria themselves, yes, but the toxins they've produced are heat-resistant and remain in the rice. So you might reheat your rice until it's piping hot, thinking you've made it safe. But the dangerous toxins could still be present, ready to cause you trouble. Eating rice containing these toxins can lead to what's sometimes called fried rice syndrome, though it can happen with any cooked rice that hasn't been handled properly. Symptoms usually involve nausea and vomiting, often appearing fairly quickly after eating the contaminated rice, sometimes within 30 minutes to 6 hours, or abdominal cramps and diarrhea, which might take a bit longer to show up, usually 6 to 15 hours. Neither is a pleasant experience for anyone, but for us, dealing with dehydration from vomiting or diarrhea can be much more serious. It can impact kidney function, overall energy levels, and just generally set you back. So what's the takeaway here with cooked rice? It's not that you can never eat leftover rice. It's about how you handle it right after cooking. The key is minimizing the time it spends at room temperature, where those spores can activate and multiply. If you cook rice and you know you'll have leftovers, cool it down as quickly as possible. The best way is to portion it out into shallow containers right after serving dinner. Maybe even spread it out a bit so the heat can dissipate quickly, and then get it into the refrigerator within an hour or two of cooking. Don't leave the pot sitting on the stove for hours. Once it's cooled and refrigerated, you can store it safely for a day or two. But honestly, eating leftover rice within 24 hours is generally the safest bet. And when you do reheat it, make sure it's piping hot all the way through, above 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 degrees Celsius, to kill any remaining bacteria, even though that won't get rid of the toxins already produced. If you're ever in doubt about how long the cooked rice has been sitting out, or if it's been in the fridge for more than a couple of days, it's really better to err on the side of caution and just toss it. Your peace of mind and your health are worth more than a serving of questionable rice. It might seem like a small thing, but this simple practice, getting cooked rice into the fridge quickly and being mindful of how long you keep it, can make a big difference in preventing an unpleasant and potentially harmful episode. It's a perfect example of how just a little bit of knowledge about food safety can really protect us. Now, moving on from rice, there's another food that often gets reheated without a second thought, but also carries a potential risk. And that second food item we need to be cautious about when reheating is something many of us rely on for quick, healthy meals. Cooked chicken, or really, any cooked poultry like turkey. Think about it. A roasted chicken for Sunday dinner, and then you've got leftovers for sandwiches, salads, or maybe a quick chicken and vegetable stir-fry later in the week. Again, perfectly logical and economical. But just like with rice, there are some potential downsides if we're not careful about how we handle and reheat it. The main concern with reheating cooked poultry like chicken comes down to how the protein changes when it's heated multiple times, and the risk of bacterial growth if it wasn't stored correctly initially or isn't reheated properly. Chicken and turkey are high in protein, which is fantastic for us, essential for muscle maintenance and overall body function. However, when these proteins are heated, cooled, and then heated again, their structure can change. For some people, especially those with a more sensitive digestive system, which can sometimes happen as we get older, this altered protein structure can be harder to digest. It might lead to an upset stomach, bloating, or just a general feeling of discomfort after eating. It's not necessarily dangerous in the same way the rice toxins are, but it's certainly not pleasant, and it can contribute to feeling less than your best. Beyond the protein issue, there's the more significant concern of bacteria, particularly Salmonella and Campylobacter, which are common on raw poultry. While thorough initial cooking kills these harmful bacteria, any surviving bacteria, or more commonly new bacteria introduced through handling or improper storage, can multiply rapidly if the cooked chicken is left in the danger zone of temperatures, roughly between 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius and 60 degrees Celsius. This is the temperature range where bacteria are happiest and multiply fastest. Just like with rice, leaving cooked chicken sitting out on the counter after dinner for too long is a big no-no. It needs to be cooled and refrigerated promptly, ideally within 2 hours of cooking. Now, when it comes to reheating cooked chicken, the primary risk is not heating it thoroughly enough to kill any bacteria that might have grown during storage. If you only warm it up slightly, or if you heat it unevenly, like sometimes happens in a microwave leaving cooler spots, you can create pockets where bacteria can survive and potentially make you sick. Symptoms of illness from Salmonella or Campylobacter can include fever, abdominal cramps, diarrhea, and sometimes vomiting. Again, things we absolutely want to avoid. So what's the best way to handle cooked chicken leftovers? First and foremost, cool and refrigerate it quickly after the initial meal. Store it in airtight containers in the fridge for no more than 3 to 4 days. When you decide to eat it, you have a couple of options. Eating it cold in a sandwich or salad is generally quite safe, assuming it was stored properly from the start, because you're not going through that reheating process that can alter the protein or risk uneven heating. If you prefer to eat it hot, it is crucial to reheat it thoroughly. This means heating it until it is steaming hot all the way through, reaching an internal temperature of at least 165 degrees Fahrenheit or 74 degrees Celsius. You might want to cut larger pieces into smaller ones to ensure even heating. Using a microwave can be tricky for even heating. Stirring the food halfway through and letting it stand for a minute or two afterwards can help. Reheating on the stovetop or in an oven is often more reliable for getting it hot all the way through. And just like with rice, avoid reheating chicken more than once. Cook it, cool it, refrigerate it, reheat once if you're eating it hot or enjoy it cold. If you reheat it and don't finish it, that remaining portion should probably be discarded. Thinking about these things isn't about being overly anxious about every meal. It's about building good habits that protect us without requiring constant worry. Getting leftovers into the fridge promptly and being mindful of heating them sufficiently are small steps that add up to much greater peace of mind and safety. Now, the third category of foods to be wary of reheating might also seem a little surprising. It includes certain types of cooked vegetables, particularly those that are high in compounds called nitrates. Vegetables like spinach, lettuce, celery, beets, and even carrots contain nitrates. Nitrates are natural compounds, and in vegetables they're generally considered harmless, and some even have potential health benefits. The issue arises when cooked vegetables containing nitrates are allowed to cool down slowly and are then reheated. Over time, And with reheating, nitrates can be converted into nitrites. And under certain conditions, nitrites can then be further converted into nitrosamines. Why is this a concern? Nitrites and nitrosamines, particularly in higher concentrations, can potentially be problematic for our health. Some studies have linked high exposure to nitrites and nitrosamines to an increased risk of certain cancers. Although this is often associated with preserved meats where nitrates and nitrites are added as preservatives rather than naturally occurring ones in vegetables. However, the concern with cooked vegetables, especially for older adults whose digestive and metabolic processes might be a little different, is that reheating can accelerate this conversion process from nitrates to nitrites and potentially nitrosamines. While the risk from occasionally reheating, say, a small portion of spinach is likely quite low, it's one of those cumulative things. If you're cooking a large batch of something like a vegetable soup or stew containing these high nitrate vegetables and reheating it multiple times over several days, the levels of nitrites and potential nitrosamines could increase. Yes, that's right. It's not all about avoiding reheating. There are certain dishes that absolutely require a proper, thorough reheating to ensure they are safe to eat as leftovers. And this is where things like temperature come into play in a really crucial way. We talked about the danger zone for bacterial growth. Those temperatures between 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius and 60 degrees Celsius, where bacteria can multiply rapidly. Dishes that spend too much time in that zone after cooking are prime candidates for needing a robust reheat. The first type of food that falls squarely into the must reheat thoroughly category are combination dishes, especially those containing meat, poultry, fish, or beans, mixed with vegetables, grains, and sauces or liquids. Think of your wonderful homemade soups, stews, casseroles, chili, curries, pasta dishes with meat sauce, or even that lovely shepherd's pie. These are comfort foods, often made in big batches, and they are fantastic as leftovers. However, because they contain a mix of ingredients, often in a moist environment, they provide a perfect breeding ground for bacteria if they cool down slowly, or if they are only partially warmed up. Let's consider a hearty beef stew, for instance. You've got meat, potatoes, carrots, maybe some broth thickened with flour. It cooks for a long time, killing initial bacteria. You eat your fill and you've got a good amount left. You let it cool for a bit before putting it in the fridge. During that cooling period, as the temperature drops through the danger zone, any dormant spores that survived the cooking, or any new bacteria that found their way in from the air, a utensil, etc., can start to wake up and multiply. The rich, moist environment is just what they love. Now you put it in the fridge, which slows their growth significantly, but might not stop it entirely depending on how quickly it cools down. The next day, you decide to have some stew for lunch. If you just scoop it out and warm it up lukewarm, or only heat the edges but the center is still cool, you haven't done enough to kill the bacteria that might have multiplied during the cooling and storage phases. You've essentially just warmed up a potential bacterial soup to a comfortable temperature for the bacteria to continue thriving. Or worse, you might be eating a high concentration of them. This is where food poisoning risks really come into play with leftovers. That's why it is absolutely essential to reheat these types of combination dishes until they are steaming hot all the way through. You need to get the temperature of the food above that 140 degrees Fahrenheit danger zone threshold, and ideally up to 165 Fahrenheit or 74 degrees Celsius or higher. Holding that temperature for a short time, to ensure any harmful bacteria that might be present are killed. This applies whether you're using a microwave, stovetop, or oven. When reheating soup or stew on the stovetop, stir it frequently to ensure even heating and prevent scorching on the bottom. Bring it to a rolling boil for at least a minute or two. You'll see steam rising from the entire pot. For casseroles or dishes in the oven, cover them to retain moisture and heat until the center is bubbling hot. If you're using a microwave, which is fast and convenient, it can sometimes heat unevenly. To counteract this, especially with larger portions, stir the dish halfway through the heating process. Also, after the microwave stops, let the food stand for a minute or two. The heat continues to distribute during this standing time, helping to ensure it's hot throughout. You should see steam rising from the dish, and if you were to use a food thermometer, the internal temperature should reach 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 degrees Celsius. Don't be afraid to give it an extra 30 seconds or a minute if it doesn't seem hot enough. Better safe than sorry. It's also worth mentioning here that when reheating a large quantity of soup or stew, it's better to reheat only the portion you plan to eat right away. Scooping out a single serving and reheating just that amount minimizes the number of times the bulk of the dish is subjected to heating and cooling cycles, which is always a good practice for reducing risk. The risks associated with not thoroughly reheating these dishes are significant foodborne illnesses caused by bacteria like E. coli, Salmonella, Staphylococcus aureus, and others. Symptoms can range from mild digestive upset to severe vomiting, diarrhea, fever, and abdominal pain. And as we've discussed, these can be much harder on our bodies as we age. Properly reheating leftovers isn't just about making the food palatable. It's a critical step in food safety. So the simple rule for these lovely combination dishes, your soups, stews, casseroles, and the like, is to treat reheating as a cooking process in itself. You're not just warming it up, you're cooking it again to make it safe. Get it steaming hot all the way through every time you reheat it. And similar to the advice for chicken, try to avoid reheating the same leftovers multiple times. Cook once, cool, refrigerate, and reheat once the portion you intend to eat. Any leftovers from that second heating should probably be discarded. This might sound a bit like a lecture, but please know it comes from a place of caring. We all want to enjoy our food and our lives without unnecessary health setbacks. Understanding these basics about reheating these common dishes is just another layer of protection we can give ourselves. It's empowering to know why we do certain things in the kitchen, rather than just following rules blindly. Now, closely related to combination dishes, but perhaps deserving its own mention because of its prevalence in many homes, is the second food type that absolutely requires thorough reheating. And that's any dish containing leftover cooked meat or poultry as the primary component, but not necessarily in a stew or casserole form. Think slicing up that leftover roast beef, pork, or turkey for a subsequent meal, perhaps to go with some fresh vegetables or potatoes, or using leftover cooked ground meat from tacos or spaghetti bolognese. While the initial poultry discussion covered the protein structure aspect and general handling, the specific need for thorough reheating applies strongly here too, especially for larger pieces of meat or poultry that might not heat evenly. Let's say you have some slices of leftover roasted turkey. You pulled it out of the fridge, maybe put the slices on a plate, and are thinking of just warming them gently. The danger is that during the cooling process and storage, bacteria could have contaminated the surface of the meat, Or if the turkey wasn't cooked perfectly evenly initially, there might have been areas where bacteria survived. When you reheat slices or pieces of meat, it's vital that the entire piece reaches a safe temperature. Just warming the outside won't cut it. The same principle applies here. You need to heat the leftover meat or poultry until it is steaming hot throughout, reaching an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 degrees Celsius. If you're reheating slices, putting them in a covered dish in the oven or microwave is often better than just microwaving them on a flat plate, as the cover helps trap steam and heat more evenly. Adding a little bit of broth or water to the dish can also help create steam and prevent the meat from drying out while ensuring it heats through. On the stovetop, you might chop or shred the meat to reheat it in a pan, again stirring and heating thoroughly. The risk with under-reheated leftover cooked meat or poultry is the survival of bacteria like Listeria monocytogenes, which can grow even at refrigerator temperatures, though slowly. While less common than Salmonella or E. coli, Listeria infection can be particularly serious for older adults, leading to severe illness, hospitalization, and in rare cases, even death. Symptoms can include fever, muscle aches, headache, stiff neck, confusion, loss of balance, and sometimes gastrointestinal symptoms. It's a serious one, and proper reheating is one way to protect ourselves. So, when you're pulling out that leftover roast or chicken to make another meal, remember that simply taking the chill off isn't enough. You need to bring it back up to a safe, hot temperature throughout the entire piece. Cutting it into smaller pieces before reheating is a simple trick to help ensure that heat penetrates evenly and quickly. And again, reheat only the portion you plan to eat right away, and avoid reheating the same meat multiple times. These points about combination dishes and cooked meats might seem repetitive, but the principle is so fundamental to food safety that it really bears emphasizing. Any cooked food that has been cooled and stored has the potential for bacterial growth. The act of thorough reheating is our primary defense against consuming harmful levels of these bacteria. It's a simple process. Heat it until it's steaming hot all the way through, but it's a non-negotiable one for safety with these types of leftovers. Now let's talk about the third food type that definitely needs to be reheated properly. And this one is often part of a meal containing the previously mentioned items, making it doubly important to get it right. And the third type of food that you absolutely must reheat thoroughly if you're eating it as a leftover is cooked seafood. This includes things like cooked fish fillets, shrimp, crab, or any dish where cooked seafood is the main ingredient. We often think of seafood as being very delicate, and it is, both in terms of cooking it initially so it doesn't dry out, and in terms of handling leftovers safely. Cooked seafood, like other proteins, is highly perishable. It's a wonderful source of nutrients, but it's also a prime environment for bacterial growth if not handled correctly after cooking. Seafood can carry bacteria that are naturally present in the water, and while proper initial cooking kills these, just like with meat or poultry, recontamination can happen, or bacteria can multiply if the cooked seafood is left at room temperature for too long. Once it's cooked and begins to cool, those bacteria that survive or are newly introduced can start multiplying, especially in that temperature danger zone we talked about. Reheating seafood can be a little tricky because you want to make it safe without turning it into something tough, rubbery, or dry. Nobody wants to ruin a delicious piece of fish or some lovely shrimp, but safety has to come first. Simply warming up leftover cooked seafood to a lukewarm temperature is a real risk. It won't kill potentially harmful bacteria that might have multiplied during cooling and storage. Bacteria like Vibrio parahemolyticus or Listeria monocytogenes can be associated with seafood and can cause serious illness, especially for those of us with immune systems that aren't quite as robust as they used to be. So when you're ready to enjoy your leftover cooked fish or shrimp, you need to reheat it until it is steaming hot all the way through. The safe internal temperature you're aiming for is 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 degrees Celsius. Yes, the same temperature as for chicken and other leftovers. While this might seem counterintuitive for delicate fish, it's necessary to ensure safety. How do you do this without ruining the texture? Gentle reheating methods work best while still ensuring the core temperature is reached. For fish fillets or larger pieces of seafood, reheating in an oven or toaster oven at a moderate temperature, around 275 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, or 135 to 150 degrees Celsius, covered with foil, can help retain moisture while heating through. Adding a splash of broth or water to the dish before covering can also create steam and keep it from drying out. Check for doneness by ensuring it's hot in the center, not just warm on the outside. Flaking a piece open gently can help you see if the heat has penetrated. For smaller seafood like shrimp or flaked fish in a sauce or dish, reheating gently on the stovetop in a covered pan, stirring occasionally works well. Heat it until the sauce is bubbling and the seafood is visibly hot throughout. The microwave can be used, but be very careful. Use a lower power setting if possible and heat in short intervals, stirring in between to prevent rubberiness. Again, make sure it's steaming hot all the way through. The biggest risk with reheating seafood is underheating it. We might be tempted to just warm it slightly to preserve its texture, but that leaves us vulnerable to potential foodborne illness. It's far better to have slightly less than perfect texture, but know that your food is safe to eat. Also, like other leftovers, seafood should be cooled and refrigerated promptly after the initial meal, within 2 hours at room temperature or 1 hour if the temperature is particularly warm, like above 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius. Store it in the fridge for no more than 3 to 4 days, and crucially, only reheat the portion you plan to eat right away. Reheating seafood multiple times significantly degrades its quality and increases the risk if it's not handled perfectly each time. If you heat up a piece of fish and don't finish it, that remainder should go in the bin. So to recap on the must reheat thoroughly list, we have those wonderful combination dishes like soups, stews, and casseroles, leftover cooked meats and poultry and cooked seafood. In all these cases, the potential for bacterial growth during cooling and storage means that bringing the food back up to a safe, steaming hot temperature, ideally 165 degrees Fahrenheit or 74 degrees Celsius internal temperature, is absolutely non-negotiable for our safety and well-being. Thinking about these simple guidelines for which foods to be cautious about reheating and which ones absolutely require thorough heating can make a real difference in our daily lives. It reduces the worry about getting sick from leftovers, which in turn means we can enjoy our meals and feel confident about the food we're eating. It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge so we can continue to live full, active, and healthy lives, enjoying our time and energy without being laid low by preventable issues like food poisoning. It's just another layer in the whole picture of taking good care of ourselves as we navigate these golden years. We've covered the 3 foods to be mindful of reheating and the 3 foods you absolutely need to heat thoroughly. This isn't about creating fear around leftovers. It's about building smart habits. Understanding the why behind these recommendations helps them stick and makes it easier to make good choices automatically. And these choices, simple as they are, contribute significantly to maintaining our health and vitality. So as we wrap up this discussion on reheating food, I hope it doesn't feel overwhelming. My aim isn't to make you afraid of your kitchen or your leftovers. Not at all. It's quite the opposite, actually. It's about giving you a little bit more knowledge, a few simple things to keep in mind, so you can feel more confident and more secure in your own home and with your own cooking. Because knowing these few points means you can avoid unnecessary risks and just relax and enjoy your delicious meals, whether they're fresh from the pot or from yesterday's dinner. We talked about those few foods that are a little sensitive when it comes to reheating, like the cooked rice and those sneaky toxins if it sits out too long. Remember, the key there is fast cooling and quick refrigeration. We also touched on cooked chicken and other poultry, where the protein can change a bit, and the importance of getting it piping hot all the way through if you are reheating it, or simply enjoying it cold. And then there were those certain vegetables, the ones higher in nitrates like spinach and beets, where repeated reheating might increase certain compounds. The simplest approach there is often to cook just what you need, or be extra careful about cooling, quick consumption as leftovers, and avoiding multiple reheats. These aren't reasons to never eat these foods or their leftovers, but rather reminders to be just a touch more mindful about how we handle them after they're cooked. Little adjustments in habit, big impact on peace of mind, and then we focused on the flip side, the dishes that really need that thorough steaming hot reheat. Those wonderful, comforting combination dishes like your soups, stews, and casseroles, packed with ingredients that bacteria just love if they're left at lukewarm temperatures, and any leftover cooked meat, poultry, or seafood. For these, the message is crystal clear. You simply must heat them all the way through until they're steaming hot every single time you reheat a portion. Think of 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 degrees Celsius as your friend. Even if you're not using a thermometer, steaming hot usually gets you there. This isn't being fussy, it's being smart. It's our main defense against those unwelcome foodborne illnesses that can really take a toll, especially on our bodies at this stage of life. Honestly, incorporating these simple habits into your routine isn't difficult. It's about making prompt cooling and proper storage a natural part of your kitchen cleanup after a meal. It's about being just a little more deliberate when you're warming up leftovers, taking that extra minute to make sure they're heated through, stirring that soup, covering that casserole. These aren't chores. They're acts of self-care. They're ways you are looking out for your own health and energy levels, ensuring you can continue to do all the things you love without being sidelined by something completely avoidable. Think about it. The energy you save by not having to deal with an upset stomach or worse. The peace of mind knowing you're being smart about your food. The ability to just go about your day feeling well and strong. These little habits contribute directly to that. They support your ability to enjoy time with family, pursue hobbies, stay active, or simply relax without feeling unwell. It's all part of the bigger picture of maintaining our vitality and independence. We've accumulated so much wisdom over the years, haven't we? Adding practical knowledge like this to our repertoire just makes us even more capable of living our best lives. Taking good care of ourselves doesn't have to be complicated or involve drastic changes. It's often in these small, consistent practices, like how we handle our delicious leftovers, that we build a foundation for ongoing health and well-being. It's about respecting the food we eat and the bodies we live in. It's about making mindful choices that pay off in how we feel every day. And honestly, mastering these few points means you can confidently enjoy those leftovers, which is a little win in itself, right? Saving time and effort while staying safe? That sounds pretty good to me. I hope this conversation has been helpful, maybe even shedding a little light on some things you hadn't considered before. It's always interesting to learn the why behind these food safety recommendations, rather than just hearing a list of rules. Understanding the potential risks from bacteria or chemical changes helps us appreciate why these steps are important and motivates us to follow them consistently. I'd really love to hear from you. Do you have any kitchen habits you swear by for food safety? Or maybe a clever way you reheat certain leftovers to keep them tasting great while still being safe? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your insights could be incredibly helpful to others in our community. We can all learn from each other's wisdom and experiences, can't we? If you found this discussion valuable, if it gave you something helpful to think about, please do give the video a thumbs up. It helps me know what kind of content resonates most with you and encourages me to keep making more videos like this. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. We talk about all sorts of things aimed at helping you live a healthy, fulfilling, and vibrant life in your 60s, 70s, and beyond. From managing your energy levels, to simple health tips, to finding joy in everyday life, there's always something new to explore together. Please subscribe to Holistic Health YT. Thank you very much.